The Galactic Academy was the most famous school in the entire universe. Every species wanted to send their best students there. But first, those students had to pass the survival exam. This exam was very hard. Most students failed. Some even died. The exam was simple to explain but very difficult to complete. Students would be dropped on a dangerous forest moon called Velar 7. They had to survive for 72 hours. 3 full days. The catch was that they could only use natural materials, wood, plants, stone. No technology. No metal. No advanced tools from their home planets. For most alien species, this meant hiding in caves and hoping nothing found them. They would wait and shake with fear until the exam ended. But this examination cycle was different. This time, a human was taking the test. His name was Jake Morrison. He was 26 years old and came from a place called Montana on planet Earth. Back home, he had been something called an Eagle Scout. This meant he had spent many years learning to survive in wild places. He knew how to build fires. He knew how to find food. He knew how to make shelter from nothing but trees and plants. Jake was the first human to ever attempt the Galactic Academy exam. The aliens did not think he would last long. In the observation dome high above the forest moon, hundreds of aliens watched the exam on giant screens. They came from many different worlds. Some had hard shells like insects. Some had fur and claws. Some were made of crystal or gas or things humans could not even imagine. Ambassador Thelvix was one of the watchers. He was a Vexian, a species that looked like giant insects with hard armor covering their bodies. He clicked his mouthparts together and made a sound like laughter. "Look at that soft little creature," Thelvix said. "He has no armor, no claws, no poison. He will freeze to death before the sun goes down." Standing next to him was Rella, a Kovani female. Her species looked like tall cats covered in spotted fur. Her ears moved back and forth as she watched the screens. "I read about humans before coming here," Rella said. "Their planet file says they are persistent predators. They used to chase animals until the animals died from exhaustion." "That is stupid," Thelvix said. "No species would do something so crazy." The file also says they conquered their entire planet. Every environment. Deserts, frozen lands, jungles, mountains. They live everywhere. Thelvix waved one of his many arms. "Lies and exaggeration. Look at him. He is weak." On the screen, Jake had already started moving through the forest. The other exam candidates were running around looking for caves or trees to hide in. They were panicking. But Jake was calm. He walked slowly and looked at everything around him. Then he started picking up sticks. "What is he doing?" Rella asked. She leaned closer to the screen. Jake knelt down next to a fallen branch. He picked it up and bent it. He was testing how flexible it was. He shook his head and threw it away. Then he found another branch. He tested that one too. This time he nodded and kept it. He did this again and again. He was very picky about which sticks he kept. He wanted specific shapes and sizes. The aliens watching had no idea why. After collecting sticks, Jake found a tree with loose bark. He used his fingers to peel long strips of the bark away. The bark was thin and strong, like rope. He collected many pieces of it. Then he walked to a rocky area near a small stream. He searched the rocks carefully. When he found certain types of stone, he picked them up. He hit the stones together in a specific way. Pieces broke off. The broken pieces were very sharp. "Is he making tools?" One alien asked. "That is not possible," another said. "Tools require factories and machines." But Jay kept working. He sat down in a clear area and spread out all his materials. He had the bendy stick. He had the straight sticks. He had the bark strips. He had the sharp stones dot, and then he started building something. The aliens in the observation dome grew very quiet. They watched Jake's hands move. He was doing something none of them understood. He was taking raw materials and changing them into something new. First, he worked on the bendy stick. He used a sharp stone to carefully shape it. He carved notches at both ends. The stick was curved like a smile. Then he took the bark strips. He twisted them together, over and over, until they became a strong cord. He tied this cord to the notches on both ends of the curved stick. When he pulled the cord back, the stick bent even more. When he let go, it snapped back. "What is that thing?" Thelvix asked. His voice was no longer laughing. Jake picked up one of his straight sticks. He used his sharp stone to make one end pointed. He hardened the point by holding it over a small fire he had somehow created by rubbing sticks together. Then he attached flat leaves to the other end of the straight stick using sticky tree sap. He placed the straight stick against the cord. He pulled the cord back. The curved stick bent. He released. The straight stick flew through the air. It crossed 30 meters in less than a second. It hit a tree and sank 4 inches into the wood. The observation dome exploded with noise. Aliens were shouting and clicking and buzzing in 100 different languages. What was that? Someone screamed. They threw the stick without touching it. How is that possible? Proctor Vex was an old gray-skinned alien who had watched over 300 exams. She had seen many things, but she had never seen this. "That is called a bow and arrow," she said quietly. "I read about these in the human history files. They use these weapons to conquer their entire world." "A weapon?" Thelvix said. "From sticks and string?" "Their ancestors used these to kill animals 10 times their size. They used these to fight wars. They used these to take over every piece of land on their planet." On the screen, Jake was not finished. He made more arrows. 10, 11, 12. He made a container from bark to carry them. He made a knife from the sharp stone, with a handle wrapped in bark for a better grip. Then he stood up and walked into the forest. But he was not walking like a scared prey animal looking for somewhere to hide. He was walking like a predator, looking for something to kill. Rella's fur stood up on her neck. "I thought humans were weak," she said softly. "They have no claws," Thelvix agreed. His voice was shaking now. "They have no armor or venom." Proctor Vex watched the human disappear into the trees. Her 4 eyes were wide with something that might have been fear. "They do not need claws," she said. "They make their own." 3 hours had passed since the exam began. The other candidates had found their hiding spots. They were doing what aliens always did during the survival exam. They were waiting. They were hiding. They were hoping that the Vexian candidate had dug a hole in the ground. He used his hard shell and strong arms to push through the dirt. Now he sat in his burrow like a frightened insect, waiting for the hours to pass. The Corvani candidate had climbed high into the trees. Her spotted fur helped her blend with the branches and leaves. She wrapped her tail around a thick branch and tried not to move. A crystalline being named Mamura had found a space between large rocks. Her body was made of silicon, like glass or crystal. She wedged herself into the gap where nothing could reach her. She did not need food or water for 3 days. She just needed to wait. These were the standard strategies. Hide, wait, survive. Do not fight. Do not hunt. Just stay alive until the exam ends. Jake Morrison did not know these strategies. Or maybe he knew them and simply did not care. By hour 3, Jake had finished his bow. It was a beautiful thing. The wood curved perfectly. The string was tight and strong. When he pulled it back and released, it made a sound like a deep musical note. He had also made 12 arrows. Each one was straight and balanced. The points were sharp enough to cut through leather. The leaf feathers on the back made them fly straight and true. He had made a quiver from bark to carry the arrows on his back. He had made a knife with a blade sharper than any metal. He had made fire using nothing but his hands and dry wood in 3 hours. Jake Morrison had created a complete hunting kit in the observation dome. The technicians were running numbers on their computers. They had measured the speed of the arrow when it hit the tree. The results made them nervous. The projectile was traveling at 60 meters per second, one technician reported. His voice was shaking. The kinetic energy is sufficient to penetrate Vexian carapace at close range. Ambassador Thelvix touched his own armored chest. Suddenly, his natural protection did not feel so strong. He made that from wood, Thelvix said. Just wood and plant fiber. Humans do not have natural weapons, Proctor Vex said. So they learned to make them. They have been making weapons for hundreds of thousands of years. It is built into their instincts. On the screen, Jake was moving through the forest. He walked quietly, placing each foot carefully. His eyes scanned the trees and bushes. He was looking for something. The forest moon had been stocked with prey animals for the exam. These creatures were slow and gentle. They were placed there to test if candidates could solve the problem of finding food. In 300 exam cycles, no candidate had ever successfully killed one. Candidates tried to catch them with their hands. The animals ran away. Candidates tried to trap them with simple snares. The animals avoided them. Most candidates gave up and went hungry for 3 days. Jake found a group of prey animals drinking at a stream. There were 5 of them. They looked like fat rabbits with 6 legs and blue fur. They had no idea a predator was watching them. Jake moved slowly. He circled around until the wind was blowing toward him, not toward the animals. This way, they could not smell him coming. He had learned this trick as a boy in Montana, hunting deer with his father. He got within 20 meters of the animals. Then he stopped behind a large tree. He pulled an arrow from his quiver. He placed it against the bowstring. He drew back. The arrow flew. It struck the largest animal right behind its front leg. The creature made a small sound and fell over. It did not suffer. The arrow had hit its heart perfectly. The other animals ran. But Jake was already pulling another arrow. He released. A second animal fell. He released again. A third animal fell. The observation dome was completely silent. No one spoke. No one moved. They just watched the human collect his kills. 3, Rella whispered. He killed 3 of them in less than 10 seconds. Those animals have been in the exam for years, a technician said. Hundreds of candidates have tried to catch them. None ever succeeded. The human did not try to catch them, Proctor Vex said. Her voice was heavy. He killed them from a distance. They never had a chance. Jay carried the 3 animals back to a spot he had chosen for his camp. It was a flat area near the stream, protected by large rocks on 2 sides. He had already started building a fire pit there. Now he did something that made several aliens look away from the screens. He used his stone knife to cut open the animals. He removed their insides. He removed their skins. He cut the meat into pieces and hung them on sticks over his fire. What is he doing to them? One young alien asked. She sounded sick. He is processing the meat for eating, Proctor Vex explained. Humans cannot eat raw meat safely. They must cook it with fire first. But that is so efficient? Proctor Vex suggested. Practical? Terrifying? The smell of cooking meat filled the forest. Jake sat by his fire, turning the sticks to cook the meat evenly. He looked completely relaxed. He looked like he was enjoying himself. Other candidates were hiding in holes and trees, shaking with fear. Jake was cooking dinner and planning his next hunt. By the time the sun began to set, Jake had eaten well. He had saved extra meat for later. He had collected water from the stream and boiled it over his fire to make it safe to drink. He had also started building something new. He was digging shallow trenches in the ground. He was sharpening more sticks. He was bending young trees and tying them with cord. What is he making now? Thelvix asked. The Vexian ambassador had not moved from his seat in hours. He could not stop watching. I do not know, Rella admitted. But I do not think I want to find out. Proctor Vex knew exactly what Jake was making. She had read the human history files very carefully. She knew what they were capable of. He's preparing for the night predators, she said quietly. He knows about the lurking shadows? Someone asked. He knows that predators exist. He knows they hunt at night. He knows they will come for him. Proctor Vex paused. And he is not building defenses to hide from them. Then what is he building? Proctor Vex watched the human work in the fading light. His hands moved with confidence and skill. He knew exactly what he was doing. He had probably done it many times before on his home world. He is building weapons, she said. Not just the bow. He is building traps. He is turning the entire area around his camp into a killing ground. The sun set on Villa 7. Darkness fell over the forest. Somewhere in the trees, the lurking shadows began to wake up and hunt. Jake Morrison finished his preparations. He climbed into a platform he had built in a tree, his bow in his hands and his arrows ready. He looked out into the darkness with the calm patience of a hunter. He was not worried about the night predators. The night predators should have been worried about him. Night came to Villa 7 like a black blanket falling over the world. The two moons gave some light, but the forest was still very dark. Strange sounds filled the air. Things were moving in the shadows. Things with teeth and claws and hunger. The lurking shadows were the most dangerous predators on the forest moon. They had been placed there on purpose to make the exam harder. These creatures hunted in packs. They could see heat with their special eyes. They had fangs filled with poison. They had killed at least one exam candidate in every cycle for the past 100 years. The shadows were meant to teach candidates an important lesson. The lesson was that sometimes you cannot fight. Sometimes you can only hide and hope. Sometimes you must accept that you are prey. Jake Morrison had never learned this lesson. While other candidates shook in their hiding spots, Jake was working. He had spent the hours before sunset preparing. Now his camp was surrounded by surprises. In the observation dome, the aliens watched with growing disbelief. What are those things he built? Rella asked. She pointed at the screen showing Jake's camp from above. Proctor Vex had studied human history. She recognized the designs. Those are traps, she explained. Many different kinds. The holes in the ground are pit traps. They are covered with thin branches and leaves so they look like normal ground. But if you step on them, you fall in. And at the bottom are sharp wooden spikes. That seems cruel, someone said. That seems effective, Proctor Vex corrected. The bent trees tied with rope are called spring traps. When something touches the rope, the tree snaps upright. It drives sharpened stakes into whatever triggered it. She pointed at another part of the screen. Those logs suspended in the trees are deadfall traps. If something walks beneath them and hits the trigger stick, the logs fall. They weigh hundreds of pounds. They will crush anything underneath. He built all of that in one afternoon? Thelvix asked. His voice was very quiet now. Humans are builders, Proctor Vex said. It is what they do. They change the environment to suit their needs. They do not adapt to the world. They make the world adapt to them. On the screen, Jake was sitting on his wooden platform in a tree. He had chosen this spot carefully. It gave him a clear view of the entire area around his camp. His fire was still burning, casting light and shadows across the ground. He held his bow in his lap. An arrow was already placed against the string. He was waiting at 3 hours after midnight. The first lurking shadow entered the kill zone. The creature was beautiful in a terrible way. It moved like liquid darkness, flowing between the trees without making a sound. Its body was covered in scales that seemed to absorb light. Its eyes glowed faint red as they detected the heat from Jake's fire. The shadow smelled the cooked meat from Jake's dinner. It smelled the human too. It was hungry. It began to creep closer. It never saw the tripwire. The thin cord caught the creature's leg. This pulled a trigger. A bent sapling snapped upright with tremendous force. 3 sharpened wooden stakes drove into the shadow's body. The creature died without making a sound. In the observation dome, someone screamed. Several aliens looked away from the screens. Others leaned closer, unable to believe what they had seen. It killed a shadow, Rella whispered. A trap made of sticks killed an apex predator. But the night was not over. The shadow had been part of a pack. The others heard nothing, but they smelled blood. They smelled death. This only made them more excited. Where there was death, there might be easy food. The second shadow was more careful. It approached from a different direction, testing each step before putting its weight down. It did not test the ground in front of it. Carefully enough. The leaves collapsed. The creature fell into the pit trap. Wooden spikes tore through its body. This time, there was noise. The shadow screamed and thrashed as it died slowly in the dark hole. The scream echoed through the forest. In hiding places all around the moon, other exam candidates heard it and trembled with fear. They thought the predators were hunting. They did not understand that the predators were dying. The third shadow was the smartest of the pack. It heard its companion die. It smelled the blood and the human scent. It understood that something was wrong here. This was not normal prey. The shadow circled wide around the camp. It avoided the obvious paths. It moved through the underbrush with extreme caution. But Jake was watching. From his tree platform, Jake could see the heat of his fire reflecting off the creature's scales. He could see the faint glow of its eyes. The shadow thought it was being clever. It thought it was the hunter. Jake drew his bow. He aimed at the moving darkness. He waited until the creature passed through a gap between 2 trees, clearly visible against the fire's glow. He released. The arrow flew straight and true. It struck the shadow through its eye and into its brain. The creature dropped without a sound. The 4th shadow watched from the edge of the darkness. It had seen 3 of its packmates die. It had seen the strange stick that threw smaller sticks with deadly force. For the first time in its life, it felt something it had never felt before. Fear. The shadow turned and ran into the forest. It would find easier prey elsewhere. Jake watched it go. He did not chase it. There was no need. He had made his point. This was his territory now. Anything that entered would die. He climbed down from his platform as the sky began to lighten. He walked around his camp and examined each trap. 2 needed to be reset. He did this calmly, like he was doing simple chores. Then he dragged the dead shadows into a pile. He was not going to eat them. Their meat was probably poisonous. But other scavengers might come to take the bodies. This would keep them busy and away from his camp. By the time the sun rose, Jake Morrison had survived his first night on Velar 7. He had killed 4 apex predators that had terrorized exam candidates for 100 years. He had not slept at all, but he did not look tired. He looked satisfied. In the observation dome, no one was laughing at the soft-skinned human anymore. Ambassador Thelvik sat in his chair with all his arms hanging limp at his sides. He looked like someone who had just watched the impossible happen. Our ancestors fought wars against the Kel Empire for 300 years, he said slowly. We lost millions of soldiers. We developed advanced weapons and armor and ships. We barely survived. He pointed at the screen showing Jake cooking breakfast over his fire. That creature killed 4 apex predators in one night with wood and string. What would happen if humans decided to fight a war against us? No one answered. No one wanted to think about it. Proctor Vex watched Jake eat his breakfast. The human looked completely relaxed. He was planning his day, probably thinking about improvements to his camp and traps. "The examination is supposed to test survival skills," she said quietly. "It is supposed to see if candidates can endure harsh conditions. It is supposed to teach them that sometimes you cannot win and must simply survive." She paused. "I do not think this human understands that lesson. I do not think his species ever learned it." On the screen, Jake finished his breakfast and stood up. He stretched his arms over his head and looked around at his camp. Then he smiled. He had 2 more days. He was going to build so much more. Day 2 brought the storm. VELAR-7 was famous for its extreme weather. The Academy had chosen this moon because of its challenges. Hot days, cold nights, and storms that could kill unprepared candidates in hours. The clouds came fast. One moment the sky was clear. The next moment it was black with angry clouds. Lightning flashed across the sky. Thunder shook the trees. Then the rain began. It was not gentle rain. It was rain that fell like a river from the sky. It hit the ground so hard that it turned soil into mud within minutes. The temperature dropped 20 degrees. Wind tore through the forest, ripping leaves from branches and branches from trees. In the observation dome, the aliens watched their screens with growing concern. This storm was one of the worst in recent exam history. Several of the monitoring staff were already preparing evacuation teams. The Vexian candidate was in trouble first. His underground burrow had seemed like good protection, but he had not planned for water. Rain poured into his hole faster than it could drain away. Within an hour, he was chest-deep in muddy water. "Candidate Deck 7 requires evacuation," a technician announced. "Hypothermia warning. Core temperature dropping." A rescue shuttle launched from the observation station. They pulled the Vexian from his flooded burrow. He was shaking so badly he could not speak. His hard shell had protected him from predators, but it could not protect him from cold water filling his lungs. The Krovani candidate lasted longer. Her position in the high trees kept her above the flooding, but the wind was too strong. The branches swayed wildly. Her wet fur made her heavy and clumsy. She lost her grip and fell 30 feet to the ground. Candidate Relifor requires evacuation. Possible broken bones. Hypothermia risk. Another shuttle launched. They found the Krovani lying in the mud, her leg bent at a wrong angle. She was crying and shivering. Her natural agility and climbing skills meant nothing against a storm like this. Myra, the crystalline being, had the worst luck of all. Her silicon body was strong against most things, but it could not handle rapid temperature changes. When the cold rain hit her sun-warmed crystal form, the thermal shock was too much. Cracks appeared across her surface. Candidate Mira 12 requires immediate evacuation. Structural integrity compromised. Life-threatening damage. By midday, 3 of the 5 remaining candidates had been removed from the exam. They had failed. Not because of predators. Not because of hunger. Because of weather. Only 2 candidates remained on Velar 7. One was a Silithian, a snake-like creature who had found a deep cave system. The cave protected her from the worst of the storm. The other was Jake Morrison. "Show me the human's location," Proctor Vex ordered. The screen changed to show Jake's camp. What they saw made every alien in the observation dome stop and stare. Jake was dry. He was sitting under a roof made of wooden branches, watching the rain fall outside. His fire was burning steadily, protected from the wind by a wall of stacked logs. He was drinking hot water that he had boiled with herbs to make a simple tea. How is that possible? Thelvix demanded. The storm has destroyed everything. How is he not affected? Proctor Vex zoomed the camera out to show the full picture of Jake's camp. It was not a camp anymore. It was a homestead. He built this yesterday, while the rest of us were watching him hunt, Rella said. She had stayed in the observation dome despite no longer being in the exam. She could not stop watching the human. We thought he was just playing around with sticks. We did not understand what he was really doing. Jake's shelter was not a simple lean-to or debris hut. It was a proper building with real engineering. The main structure was shaped like a tall ladder as strong poles formed the frame, lashed together at the top with rope made from plant fiber. Cross pieces added strength. The whole thing was covered in layers of large leaves, overlapping like the scales on a fish. Water ran down the leaves and onto the ground, instead of coming inside. But that was just the beginning. Jake had dug small trenches around the entire shelter. These drainage channels caught the water before it could flood his living space. The water flowed downhill, away from his camp, into the stream below. He had built the floor of his shelter raised off the ground. Logs placed flat created a platform that kept him above the cold, wet earth. Dry leaves and grass on top made it soft and warm. His fire pit was a work of genius. It was dug into a shallow hole with walls of stacked stone on 3 sides. The 4th side faced his shelter. This meant the heat bounced off the stone walls and went straight into his living space. A simple roof of branches over the fire pit kept the rain from putting out his flames. He had even built a second small structure nearby. At first, the aliens did not know what it was for. Then they saw Jake hang strips of meat inside it, over a small smoky fire. He's preserving food, Proctor Vex explained. The smoke dries the meat and keeps it from rotting. He's storing supplies for the future. The future? Someone asked. The exam only lasts 3 days. I do not think the human is thinking about the exam, Proctor Vex said slowly. I think he is thinking about staying here permanently. The data from Jake's camp was incredible. The temperature inside his shelter was stable at 18 degrees, even though the outside temperature was near freezing. The humidity was controlled by gaps he had left for airflow. He had clean water stored in containers he had made from large leaves and wooden frames. While the storm raged and the other candidates were evacuated, Jake Morrison was comfortable. He was warm. He was dry. He was well-fed, and he was building more. What is he doing now? Rella asked. Jake had put on a simple rain covering he had made from woven leaves. He was outside in the storm, working on something new. He was digging a hole behind his camp. Is that a latrine? Proctor Vex said. She sounded impressed. He's building a proper sanitation system. The hole was positioned downhill and downwind from his shelter. This meant any smell would blow away from his living space. He was even building a small screen around it for privacy. Humans did not just survive on their home world, Proctor Vex said. They did not just hide in caves and hope for the best. They built civilizations. They changed their planet. They made the environment work for them instead of working for the environment. She pointed at the screen. This human has been here for 36 hours. In that time, he has created shelter, weapons, traps, food preservation, water purification, and sanitation. He's not surviving the exam. He's colonizing the exam location. Ambassador Thelvix had not spoken in hours. He just watched the human work. Finally, he said something. My species has explored 300 worlds. We have built colonies on dozens of planets. It takes us months to establish even basic habitation with all our technology and supplies. He pointed at Jake, who was now returning to his shelter, shaking water off his rain covering. That creature did it in a day and a half with sticks and leaves. The storm continued for 8 more hours. When it finally stopped, Jake emerged from his shelter. He checked his traps. He collected more water. He started planning his next project. In the observation dome, Proctor Vex made a quiet note in her records. "Observation," she dictated. "Humans do not appear to have a maximum limit on environmental modification. Given time and materials, they may be capable of reshaping entire ecosystems. Further study recommended. Extreme caution advised." She looked at Jake's little homestead on the screen. He was now measuring trees, probably planning to cut them down for more building. "Classification may need revision," she added. "Current classification, Persistence Predator. Suggested new classification, Apex Builder. Warning level, high." On the moon below, Jake Morrison had no idea he was being studied and classified. He was too busy planning a watchtower. 72 hours. 3 days. The exam was over. A shuttle descended through the clouds of Valor 7 to pick up the remaining candidates. Only 2 had survived. The Silithian had stayed in her deep cave for the entire exam, eating moss and drinking water that dripped from the ceiling. She had lost weight. She looked exhausted. But she was alive. And then there was Jake Morrison. The shuttle pilot had trouble finding a place to land near Jake's camp. There were too many traps, too many structures, too many obstacles. Jake had to guide the pilot to a clear area that he had deliberately kept open for this exact situation. The pilot stepped out of the shuttle and stopped dead. She was a Corvani, one of the cat-like species with spotted fur. Her mouth hung open as she looked at what the human had built. "How long were you here?" she asked. 3 days, Jake said. "Wow, 72 hours. Close enough." 3 days, the pilot repeated. She looked at the main shelter with its raised floor and waterproof roof. She looked at the smokehouse with strips of preserved meat hanging inside. She looked at the fire pit with its stone walls and reflector system. She looked at the latrine with its privacy screen and drainage system. "You built all of this in 3 days?" Jake shrugged. "I was going to build a watchtower, but I ran out of time. Maybe next time." The shuttle took them up to the observation station. When Jake walked into the main hall, every alien in the room turned to look at him. There were hundreds of them, representatives from species across the galaxy. Academy officials, proctors, technicians, ambassadors. They all stared at the small, soft, furless creature who had just passed the survival exam in a way no one had ever seen before. Proctor Vex stepped forward. She was one of the oldest and most respected members of the Academy. Her gray skin was wrinkled with age. Her 4 eyes had watched 300 examination cycles. "Jake Morrison of Earth," she said formally. "You have completed the survival examination. The evaluation committee will now review your performance." The committee met in a curved room with seats arranged in a circle. 17 species were represented. They had all watched Jake Sam. They had all seen what he did. Now they had to decide what it meant. Proctor Vex began the discussion. "Let us review what this candidate accomplished in 72 hours, using only wood, stone, and plant materials." She read from her datapad. 1 primary projectile weapon with 12 units of ammunition. 1 secondary bladed weapon suitable for cutting, carving, and combat. 7 distinct trap mechanisms including pit traps, spring traps, and deadfall traps. 1 primary shelter with environmental controls, raised flooring, and waterproofing. 1 secondary structure for food preservation through smoke drying. A complete water collection and filtration system using sand and charcoal. Food stores sufficient for approximately 30 days. She paused and looked around the room. He also eliminated 6 apex predators and successfully hunted prey, animals that no previous candidate has ever caught. The room was silent. Then Ambassador Thelvix raised one of his arms. "I wish to object," the Vexian said. "The examination rules state that only natural materials may be used. This human clearly used technology. He should be disqualified." "He used wood," said a Corvani representative. "Wood, stone, and plants. Exactly as the rules specify. But he turned those materials into machines, into weapons, into structures. That is called tool use," Proctor Vex said. "Many species use tools. The rules do not forbid it. The rules should be changed then." "To what?" The Corvani representative sounded amused. "Candidates may not use intelligence. Candidates may not reshape their environment. We would have to disqualify half the galaxy." The debate continued for over an hour. Some species were afraid of what Jake's performance meant. If humans could do this with nothing but natural materials, what could they do with real technology? What kind of threats could they become? Other species were impressed. They saw potential. They saw a species that could solve problems in creative ways. They saw allies and partners and friends. Finally, Proctor Vex called for a vote. All those in favor of admitting Jake Morrison to the Galactic Academy indicate now. 16 of the 17 species voted yes. Only the Vexians abstained. Jake Morrison had passed. They brought him into the room to tell him the news. He stood before the committee in his dirty clothes, still carrying the stone knife he had made on the first day. He did not look nervous. He did not look excited. He just looked curious. "Jake Morrison," Proctor Vex announced. "You have been accepted into the Galactic Academy. Your performance in the survival examination was unprecedented. Do you have anything to say?" Jake thought about it for a moment. Then he smiled. "That was the test?" "Huh." He scratched his head. "We used to do harder stuff than that for fun back home. We called it camping." The room went very quiet. "Camping," Proctor Vex repeated. "You call that activity camping?" "Yeah, go out into the woods for a few days. Build a shelter. Make some fires. Catch some fish. Sleep under the stars." Jake shrugged. "It is relaxing." "Relaxing," Thelvix said. His voice was barely a whisper. "He finds that relaxing." Proctor Vex made another note in her records. Later, it would become famous throughout the Academy. Human observation number 47. The activity known as camping involves voluntary exposure to survival conditions for the purpose of recreation. Humans consider this enjoyable. Classification note. This species may not have a functional fear response. The news of Jake's performance spread quickly through the galaxy. Within days, the Academy received applications from 47 more humans. They all wanted to take the survival exam. The Academy officials met in emergency session. They could not give humans the same test as other species. It was not fair. Not to the humans, but to the test. They decided to create a separate examination for human candidates. It would take place on a death world. Extreme temperatures. Toxic atmosphere. Aggressive megafauna. Limited water. No edible plants. They asked Jake to help design the new test. He agreed. His suggestions were reviewed by the safety committee. They rejected every single one. "Too dangerous," the committee said. "Candidates might actually die." Jake looked confused. "But that is the point of a survival test, is it not? There is a difference between challenging and impossible." "I survived worse when I was 12, Jake said. "My scout leader made us camp in the mountains during winter. 3 feet of snow. Below zero temperatures. We had to build snow caves to stay warm. Why would anyone do that to children?" Jake smiled. Character building. The Academy would later note that humans had many phrases that connected suffering with personal improvement. They seemed to believe that hardship made them stronger. They actively sought out difficult experiences. They were a very strange species. Jake Morrison graduated from the academy 3 years later. He became famous throughout the galaxy, not as a warrior or a scientist or a diplomat. He became famous as a survival instructor. He taught other species how to do what humans did naturally. How to look at a forest and see building materials. How to look at a rock and see a tool. How to look at a problem and see a solution. Some species learned quickly. Others struggled. None of them ever matched what Jake had done on Velar 7, but they all improved. They all became better at surviving. On the day Jake retired from teaching, one of his students asked him a question. "Professor Morrison, what is the secret? How do humans survive when other species fail?" Jake thought about it for a long time. He remembered the forest moon. He remembered building his bow, his traps, his shelter. He remembered the storms and the predators and the cold nights. "I think," he said slowly, "it is because we never accept that survival is enough. Staying alive is just the beginning. Once we are alive, we want to be comfortable. Once we are comfortable, we want to improve. Once we improve, we want to grow. We never stop. We never say good enough." He smiled. "Give a human 3 days in the wilderness, and he will build a house. Give him 3 weeks, and he will build a village. Give him 3 years, and he will build a city. We cannot help it. It is what we are." His student wrote this down. Later, it became one of the most famous quotes in the Academy archives. Final classification of the human species. Apex builders. Threat level, unknown. Recommended response, friendship. Reasoning. If they build when threatened, imagine what they will build when they are happy. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about humanity. They were not the strongest species. They were not the fastest or the most dangerous. But they were the most determined dot, and they would never, ever stop building.